And she actually called me just after we had moved here and said, I was so happy to pay that ticket. They were so nice on the other line. And I thought,
people thank our police department for giving them a ticket. I'm Rusty Paul, and I'm the mayor of Sandy Springs, and we're in the mayor's office, which looks north from City Springs.
How do you define your role as a resident here?
Well, that's the most important job I have, is being a resident. Mm-hmm. But it is I bring the perspective of somebody who lives here and has to encounter this community not as one of its leaders, but as one of its citizens and residents. And I have to encounter the traffic, the water bills, all the other things that everybody else has to deal with. I'm subject to the same challenges. So I approach my job as mayor because I am a citizen. I take the perspective of what do I have to do? What should I be doing in this office that makes life a little bit better for those people who face the same challenges in this community that I do? And so that is what influences my perspective more than anything else. Because I have to experience this community the same way everybody else does.
Sure.
I don't get a police escort when I leave home in the morning, or if I'm going to a meeting, I get in my car, I put my hands on the steering wheel, and I look at the backside of somebody else's car just like everybody else does. So that informs my decision making probably more than anything else I do, because I do encounter this community just the way everybody else does.
And what do you think, obviously now for the last, 12, 13 years, we've officially been a city. What do you see for the next, 10, 15, 20 years? What's the biggest opportunity ahead of us as a city, do you think?
Well, we're still coming to grips with what kind of community we want to be when we grow up. I mean, we're just in our adolescence.
Absolutely.
And we spent a lot of time in the formation period talking about what kind of government we wanted, what are some of the policies we wanted to implement, what kind of community did we aspire to create. But that's 13 years ago now, and we've been kind of updating that dialogue as we go. And a lot of the early things that we did, like making sure that the services were actually delivered, and we delivered them well, and that people got responded to. They got their phone calls returned. When they had a complaint, even if we couldn't solve it, we at least tried to explain why we couldn't solve it. And so, that now we're in the phase of kind of looking longer term and dealing with the question you just asked. What is the kind of community that we're evolving to be over the next 25 years? When I was first elected, I told my friends who gathered at Jay Christopher's on election night, I said, and I meant this, I care about what you think. I want to be a mayor that you're proud of, and I really want to deliver the kind of services and do the things that you would be proud of. But more important to me is, what are our children and grandchildren going to be saying 25, 30 years from now about the decisions that we make that have the long-term impact on this community? And I'm much more attuned in my thinking to the long-term consequences of our decisions. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama in the 1960s and 70s, and I came to understand very early on how important political leadership was. The difference between Atlanta and Birmingham, my hometown, over 50 years later, was the quality of political leadership in the 1960s is still reverberating. Atlanta has gone on to become, at that time in the 50s and 60s, Atlanta and Birmingham were the same size, and Birmingham was going faster. Bad political leadership set that city back decades, still is reverberating. Atlanta, different kind of political leadership moved forward. So I understand the importance of the decisions that I make in this office and the council makes, and the decisions made in this new building really do have long-term lasting consequences. And to the extent that I can, You're looking into the future through a very, very hazy glass. But to the extent that I can, I try to take into consideration what are the long-term implications of these decisions on the long-term viability and health of this community. That's why I've gotten involved in things like transit. Whatever transit system is built out, I'll probably never be able to ride other than kind of what we've got today. But the old adage is, when's the best time to plant a tree? 30 years ago. Second best time is today. We went 30 years without really doing any planning or thinking about how we move people. We developed this area, and if you look at the road system here, if you took a map of the 1940s and looked at this area, you would see we've only built two major arterials since the 1940s. That's 285 and 400. All the rest of these roads are old farm roads that we've adapted to move a large number of people today. And so moving people more efficiently and more effective and giving them choices and how they get there so that they don't have to always get in a car to go 2 blocks is one of the things that we're trying to work through. It's transit is part of it, but trails and bike paths, trying to figure out how we integrate. We're in a period of amazing technological transformation, particularly when it comes to transportation. How can we design systems today that are flexible enough that will allow future technological innovations to be incorporated into the infrastructure we got? Because we're not going to be able to build a lot of new infrastructure. It's a very mature area. It's very costly to build infrastructure. How can we introduce flexibility so that the infrastructure we have can adapt to new technologies? Those are the kind of things that I spend a lot of time thinking about and looking down the road. I want to make sure we deliver the services that are essential today. I want to make sure that potholes get filled, streets get paved, all those kinds of basic services get done. But I see my job as kind of the CEO, and the CEO's job is to look down into the future and see what it is we need down the road, and maybe not get it accomplished, but at least set in motion the planning and the thinking that can kind of get us where we want to go.
You mentioned this building here. I think a lot of people, maybe not from this area or maybe even new to the area, don't really understand what all this building encapsulates. And certainly there are government offices here, but and city staff and so on. But there's a lot more going on in this building. And I told someone yesterday, in fact, that when I look at the calendar, it just seems like there's always something going on, and that to me is impressive, number one. But then number two, it's promising. It's kind of the covenant that we all agreed to,
right.
and I think that's a wonderful sign of where we are, but even where we have to go, because this building is adaptable to a lot of different types of events. And for me, just in the last couple of months, to see how full that calendar has been is impressive.
Well, this building, it was real clear when we started down this path, and really from the day we started as a city, we had identified this site as the site for a city hall. I mean, it's Mount Vernon. It's on a pedestal.
Right.
It deserves a statue on top or some kind of artwork. And but it got real clear that once we started the serious planning for this facility, that the community wanted more than just a warehouse for government operations. They wanted a place to come together and do what I call building the connective tissue of community. We had no place where we could gather as community. We had the lawn at Heritage, which we had the concerts, get to seat about 1,000, 1,200 people. And I would sit down in my table, which is near the front, looking back up on the hillside, and see 1,200 people having a wonderful time, sitting next to people that they probably didn't know, getting to know them. Their kids probably knew each other in school. They were playing, and it was building that connective tissue of community. But we didn't have any places we could do that. And so that was the genesis in my mind when I became mayor of why we built what we built here. And it was real clear the community wanted something. There was a hunger for that. I mean, all you got to do is look at the theater. I mean, their pro forma plan called for about 500 season tickets in the first year. They had to cut the season ticket sales off at 4,000, so they'd had individual performance tickets to sell. They just got through doing a Elf. And they put on 2 extra performances and sold them out within 48 hours. the events that we've had on the city green, the concerts and the events out there, people walk in from the neighborhoods, and I just look out and say, that's why we built this. If you want to know, it's families being together, doing things with their friends. The kids are out there playing, they're seeing their schoolmates. Parents may not know each other, but because their kids are playing, they get to know each other, and there's new relationships being formed. This is a building, but it's more importantly an activity center. It's a connection center. It's where we build this larger sense of community, and that's why the theater is important. The small theater, the studio theater is important. The green is important. I tell everybody, we're going to treat you so many ways, you're bound to like one of them. And I say that, what I really mean is we're going to have so many different things here that you're going to feel compelled to be able to show up. The goal for me is if every citizen, if 110,000 people, which is what we are today, find the absolute, are compelled to come here to at least one event a year, then we've been successful. We've created that community magnet that brings people together and makes them have a sense of pride in the larger community, which is very important in the long run, to connect everybody. And we're a big city with all the challenges of a big city, but we're also in a lot of ways still have that small suburban community feel, and we need to be able to preserve that. But you've got to have a place where people can come together to be able to do that. We've been doing it in the neighborhoods. We've been doing it around the swimming pool. We've been doing it in the backyard. We've been doing it at the tennis courts. All those places where we come together as community in smaller neighborhood level. We needed this larger venue so that we could come together as the larger community and have this sense of pride of being in Sandy Springs, of being part of Sandy Springs, and being part of something that's larger than ourselves.
Yeah, there's two things there. The first is for any government building to sell out. I mean, you talking about being a CEO, I feel like that's kind of reminiscent of a business, right? That's capitalism. That's what ultimately you would love to have, right? Is to oversell and sell out as quickly as possible for a building like this or for events like we have here. And then the second thing, completely the polar 180 degrees from that, is that there are rocking chairs.
Well, I told everybody that this was going to be everybody's neighborhood, and some people took that and said, well, if somebody said, well, the mayor said this is everybody's backyard. Well, I said it's going to be everybody's neighborhood, but I like the fact that they consider it now everybody. It's the community's backyard. We got rocking chairs in the back. We've got tables in the front. People just show up and they have lunch. Just ordinary citizens show up. I'll go out and when the weather's nice, there'll be people out there rocking. That's what I say. We want to create this environment where people want to come here and hang out and be with other people. We built this building not only to be as publicly accessible as it could be, but as publicly usable as we could be. In the lobby area, we've got those little cubbies where the goal is right now people go to Starbucks to hold little neighborhood meetings or small business meetings. We want them to come grab a cup of coffee and they can go in there. It's a little privacy. You don't have to sign up, just show up. If one's empty, sit there. I go in and there's citizens there having their meetings, a cup of coffee, a Danish or something. And that's why we built it. We wanted it to be much more, as I say, than just a warehouse for government operations. We wanted this to be a community center that people felt ownership of and felt some ownership in. And I think we've accomplished that, at least in the early going. In a large city, it's the thing that surprises me and concerns me is the number of people who live in a subdivision in a neighborhood who don't know the neighbors 2 or 3 or 4 houses down the street. And you can become very isolated. And in a city this size, if you don't want to be bothered, it's big enough that you can kind of hide out and not be bothered. But I think most people feel that would like to have that commitment, that connection to their neighbors. It's just that we don't have the front porches that everybody used to sit out on, and people walk up and down the sidewalk, and you'd stop and have a conversation with people. Our neighborhoods aren't built like that, so we have to create opportunities for people to connect, and that's our primary goal in putting this. Building it the way we built it.
Yeah. Why Sandy Springs versus, I don't want to name names, but our closest neighbors.
Anybody else.
Anyone
else in the metro area.
I tell everyone all the time why I moved here and why I decided to move my family here. there was definitely a big appeal for the public-private partnership, particularly like for new home buyers or for people that are maybe in the surrounding area or even that live in Atlanta. Why would they come to Sandy Springs, or what do you think would appeal to most people?
Well, it's a quality of life. I mean, it truly is. I mean, one of the great things about this is we've got great neighborhoods. We've always had great neighborhoods, and the challenge is how do we make sure we preserve those great neighborhoods. We don't when we're dealing with development and redevelopment, you want to make sure that you preserve the things that made you great to begin with, and neighborhood level quality of life has always been phenomenal in Sandy Springs. We have become more of an urbanized community because of location. We've got the perimeter market just to our east. We've got the Cumberland market and the new Braves complex just to our west. And so there's a lot more commercial development, a lot more business development going on here, and there's pressure on us. And trying to make sure we achieve that balance is one of the challenges that we face. But the reason, what I tell people is I want Sandy Springs to be the most envied community in the metropolitan Atlanta area. I want to do things so well that everybody looks to Sandy Springs as that's how you do it. That's how you do it. And to a large degree, we have achieved that. I mean, I get people not only just in the metropolitan Atlanta area, but people all over the state. When I go to the municipal meetings, or I'm on the state economic development board, and I go around the state, people know about us, and they know that we take on big projects and aren't afraid of big ideas here, and all of them designed to improve the quality of life. And so that's our goal, and then make sure that the quality of the services that you get. We don't refer to people here as citizens or taxpayers. They're customers. We treat them as if we're a business, and those people have the option of going somewhere else to get their services. And the truth is, every 4 years they do. They can replace management whenever they get ready.
Sure.
So, but it's all in setting the right kind of culture too. I mean, we've been very fortunate that we haven't had the kind of political infighting on our council. We've got a lot of stability in our staff at the senior level. Our council gets along well. Whenever there's a big decision that we have to make, particularly on land use, I've never heard a member of council ask the question, well, how much tax revenue will we get off this? The questions always are involving, what's this going to do to the quality of life? How is this going to improve the quality of life? Is it going to add congestion? Is it, can we manage this in a way that's not going to detract from all the things that we are trying to preserve and enhance? So when you bring that kind of mindset, and I told during the referendum, I ran the referendum during the 2005 municipalization campaign. And as I was going around, I'd tell people, I said, look, the day's coming when you'll be just as angry at the council as you ever were the Fulton County Commission. That's just the nature of local government. But the difference is you can see us at church, you'll see us at the Rotary Club or the chamber meeting or in the grocery store or just walking down the street, and you'll be able to come up to us and say, hey, knucklehead, what were you thinking? And we'll have an opportunity to explain. And you don't have to drive down to the courthouse and see a commissioner who lives 50 miles away. We're in here in the neighborhood. We are living with the decisions that we make. I mean, we're subjected to as I said earlier, I am subjected to the same challenges that every other citizen has, and so every decision I make is going to have an impact on me and my family, just as it's going to have an impact on you and your family. So we take that into consideration in all the decision making. It's just that's the nature of local government. It's the hardest level from the point of view you're making decisions that really affect people's lives on a daily basis and really where they live. And so you have to be aware of that. You can't always make the. I tell people, they say, well, I don't like the decision you made. I said, well, I didn't like it either. Well, then why did you make it? I said it was the best option in a range of bad options that we had to choose from.
Right.
And that's just the nature sometimes of what you have to do. But we live here, and we have to encounter our neighbors, and we have to answer sometimes from very exercised constituents about these things, and that brings a certain thoughtfulness, I guess, to the process.
Well, and I think intent goes a long way, right? Because as you said before, you live here, right? You are accessible.
Yeah.
You know, I know you're very active on social media, and so it's not difficult to get your ear, particularly if it's something that's near and dear to your heart. But at the same time, I mean, I think it's a difficult position to put yourself in as the CEO, as the mayor of a city like this, because there are so many people. It isn't an enormous area, but there are tons of great things going on around the city, and you know, we're in a unique spot geographically, but additionally we have a lot of community assets.
Yeah.
I mean, tons of parks,
Yep.
certainly this new facility, but beyond the places are the people. And there are countless organizations across the city. I know that you've been involved with and that you have close relationships with in the past. You know, I'd like for you just to talk about the organizations, the nonprofits that really are almost like the backbone.
That's one of the things that I think one of the real assets that we have. It's one of the most engaged communities I've ever experienced. I used to run community planning and development for the whole country when I was acting assistant secretary for community planning and development at HUD, and I worked in that department as a deputy assistant before I was promoted. And so I've seen the mistakes that other communities make, and this is a really highly engaged community. And I think the reason for it was communities go through cycles. You have an area that's settled, you know, in the 60s and 70s when this area was first being developed. You had a group of people who moved out here. It's virgin territory. It had been farmland. It's just beginning to get developed. They created something very interesting, something neat. And then other people saw it and they started moving here. And what happens is, in most communities in this dynamic cycle, one day the pioneers wake up and say, "Hey, look, this is not what we came here for," and they're off and they're going somewhere else to start something else new. What happened in Sandy Springs was the pioneers stayed. They felt this was a community that was worth fighting for, and they fought for it in the face not just of benign neglect from the governing authority, but really malevolent neglect. I mean, we really had an adversarial relationship with the people who were supposed to be providing services to us. And they could have left. They were affluent enough to decide to move on, but they chose to stay here and fight for their community because they believed that there was something special about this area. And how they coped with that was they created a lot of citizen groups and organizations that were largely designed to be kind of a shadow government, to provide services in the absence of governmental services. And so you had all these nonprofits that grew up. They're really just, you call them nonprofits, they're really just citizen organizations that took on specific tasks in the community. And they built up a constituency and a following and a support group and boards of directors, and they provided the services that the community wasn't getting. When we started the city, we recognized very quickly that we had built a gem in the face of adversity in these outside groups, these citizen groups. And one of the things that we worked really hard was to make sure even though the city would be, in some cases, taking over some of the responsibilities that they had assumed through the years, we wanted to preserve that kind of citizen engagement. And you got the Community Action Center, which helps with low-income families and really provides the social services for the city. It's a private group. They take the public money that they get from us and other organizations, and they go out and leverage it with private funds and do a much better job than a lot of the government agencies that I've worked with who try to do similar things. You talked about Leadership Sandy Springs. You know, we have a real history of taking newcomers to the city and getting them engaged, teaching them about the community, and leadership has taken that role. We have the Civic Roundtable where all the nonprofits come together on a monthly basis and they talk about the challenges and the problems that they have. We have Heritage Sandy Springs. We've got Sandy Springs Society, which goes out and raises a lot of money. They provide the capital for a lot of things that happen through the years. All these citizen groups, they're self-motivated, self-organized, and one of the things we were very conscious of when we became a city was not to rob that that energy, that engagement that came through that process, and they're still very active. Virtually all of those groups. The only one that really went away was we had an organization called Sandy Springs Revitalization that was looking at this downtown area about building sidewalks and developing, capital projects to help with traffic and sidewalks and walkability. The city really did have to replace them, and they understood it. But by and large, most of the rest of the citizen groups that were engaged for 20, 30 years in this community are still active and still performing very valuable services. And that citizen and community engagement is a hallmark of this community.
Having lived here now long enough to understand and see things, it's definitely very different.
It is different.
It is very different. And it oftentimes takes living somewhere else to understand how much different. If you've been here for the last 20 or 30 years, you've been here longer than we've been a city.
Yeah.
And things have changed, right? And
if you've been here 15 years, you've been here longer than we've been a city.
What do you see as kind of the next big step for us? Obviously, this was a huge undertaking. I saw a little update from 3 years ago that there was basically this was just a big hole in the ground 3 years ago, and now here we are.
3 years ago, this was about we were 60 feet below street level right about this area.
So what do you think is, and obviously you don't have a crystal ball, you don't know ultimately what's going to happen, but maybe as a citizen, but also as the mayor, as a visionary, what do you think is the next big thing that's going to kind of come to us?
Well, first of all, a community, it's kind of like your house. You buy your house. Let's say your house was built in the 1980s, and you don't do anything to update that house and modernize it, and you get ready to sell it in 2018. You're not going to get the return on it because somebody that's going to buy that house is looking at not what it is, but what it could be.
Mm-hmm.
Same way with communities. If you're not kind of updating yourself and reinventing yourself and keeping up with expectations on a regular basis, you're becoming stagnant. And that's one of the things that we have really done, I think, a good job of trying to understand kind of where the community wants to go, what it would like to see, but beyond that, also thinking about what the future is bringing. I talked about it a little bit earlier about in making sure that in the infrastructure that we build and update, that we're making it flexible enough that it can adapt. And that's kind of where we are right now. We don't know. The pace of change, particularly from technology, is so rapid. You can't anticipate everything that may come down the pike. But what you can do is try to remain flexible to create opportunities so as change happens, you can adapt to it. And that's the mindset that I think this community really does have. It's about making sure that we rethink about who we are and what we need and where the world is going and how we need to adapt to that. That's something that we've been very adept at doing and keeping up. I think that's why we're such a popular place right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you talk about it, you're right. You can be anywhere in the metropolitan Atlanta area within 30 minutes. I mean, and to some degree, the metropolitan Atlanta area has shifted here. I mean, we've got, when you look at lifestyle, what are the things you care about? Well, first of all, healthcare. We got 3 world-class hospitals right here. I mean, we probably have the best healthcare facilities, at least in the southeastern United States. Maybe you could argue in the entire country. You wouldn't get better healthcare anywhere. What makes, retail? We're in the center of the retail world in the metropolitan Atlanta. Right on our southern border, you've got Lenox and Phipps, you've got Perimeter right by. I mean, you've got all the retail and shopping. When I became mayor, we were kind of a restaurant desert. We couldn't even get our own people to support other than a handful of restaurants. But right after I became mayor, we started the restaurant council where they could promote each other and kind of work together to get our own people to frequent our own restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been able to do that. Now we're getting unbelievably quality restaurants here. And our people are just excited. They don't have to go to Roswell or Dunwoody or Midtown or Buckhead
Mm-hmm.
to have a great meal.
Mm-hmm.
They get in the car in 2 minutes, or in some neighborhoods you just simply walk down the street to a world-class restaurant. That's an amazing change that's really happened since we become a city. So it's those kind of things that really do contribute to the quality of life that I think make us such a hot prospect. It's also, it does come down to leadership. We've got, and not only, it's not just me or the council, it's that, as I talked about a little bit earlier, that citizen engagement that's so pervasive here. We have a community of leaders, and they have very high standards, and we all work together to try and maintain those standards. And all of it is focused on making sure that you come here, you can raise your kids here, you can get the educational opportunities you're looking for. I mean, we've got great public schools, we've got a wide variety of private schools. Virtually all the Jewish day schools in metropolitan Atlanta are here, and you can kind of tailor your educational experience for your kids based on your own desires and needs. If you're a public education person and you're a product of public education, you want your kids to have a public education, we got great schools here. But if if you have a certain religious tradition and you want to reinforce that in your family, you've got the opportunity to do that here. Or you want a great private prep schools, we got them. So we give, it all gets around to making sure that your quality of life fits what you and your family really need and are looking for in a place. I mean, we've got some challenges. Our housing costs are a little high. And that's one of the things I'm working on. I've got 5 kids, and not a single one of them can afford to live in the town in which they grew up. Well, that's a problem. We've got, our police officers. We got a great, as you mentioned, a great police force, great firefighters. We have teachers, nurses, people who have to drive long ways to go to work. We've got to figure out how we can incorporate, find a solution for middle-class families and working-class families to be able to get home ownership opportunities, not just rental. I mean, it's still the greatest source of family wealth in this country is a single-family home or some kind of home ownership. And we've kind of lost that connection, and we need to be able to reconnect people back and be able to lower the rungs of the economic ladder so more people can get on it, and you do that through home ownership. I'm a great proponent of that. That's how I built whatever family wealth we have is through. I bought a little starter house for $35,000 years ago, and we moved up, traded, and moved up now. We got to figure out how we can do a better job of getting younger middle-class families their roots settled here. That's what made this community. We had a lot of people who moved here when their kids were young. They established their lives here. They raised their families here. And you need to keep that cycle going. That's one of our biggest challenges right now.
Very good. Well, Mayor, I appreciate it very much. Thank you so much
buddy.
for the time today.
Thanks for coming in.